Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. This week, 5.2 is coming up, so I figured for Mondays with Mr. Happy, and maybe even in a standalone video, just so people know what to expect for the week, I feel like it's worth mentioning what this week's going to be like on the YouTube side of things. For one, during patch weeks, we do a lot of direct Twitch to YouTube uploads, specifically because the first clear of an encounter, it may not be the most optimal thing to do, but it is useful information for people looking at how mechanics are dissected. I've started adding disclaimers on a lot of my early kills and early guides, before new strategies and more advanced strategies come out, that, yeah, these are work in progress. Be very open to new strategies, because I've been blamed enough for strategies in the Party Finder coming from week 1 guides. So that's what you're going to be seeing a lot of this coming week. You're going to be seeing a lot of Twitch to YouTube, as well as some very basic guides, as I still have that whole lost everything on my hard drive problem. But with all the new footage and the new templates I've come up with, it should be somewhat reasonable. It's a matter of available time, how many days it takes to actually kill the encounters, plus it means that Ruby Weapon Extreme will probably be a little bit later, since I'll be focusing on Savage, etc, etc. But we actually do have a lot of videos planned for patch 5.2, including finishing that caster versus finally, since Red Mage is going to be buffed and Summoner is going to be slightly nerfed on Tuesday. We'll have some up-to-date information about how they stack up against each other, how even the roll is, and if things are still a little bit lopsided. So that's the plan for this week, but for right now, we got to answer some questions. So first of all, thank you to all of you for tuning in, and thank you to our patrons. It's an optional means of supporting the YouTube channel, just because YouTube isn't so great sometimes. But it doesn't matter if you support it or not, you'll still get all the same content here on YouTube. It's just for your little name to be scrolling on that list, and to, maybe get a thank you here. We also, of course, thank our patrons of Darkness, who have been Khuja Cross on Jenova and Kurenai Oni for quite some time. They've gone above and beyond when it comes to supporting the channel, so they get that extra little shout out with those pictures. So thank you to both of you, thank you to all of our patrons, and thank you to all of you tuning in. Now, you see there's not too many comments on last week's show, even though it had a pretty decent viewership comparatively to some previous weeks. So I don't know if that means there's less questions, or if the only things there are questions. So could be a short show, could not be. Let's find out. I like that the first comment I saw was me last week saying, I don't think this will be a 45-minute Q&A, and it was 44 minutes. I didn't even remember saying that, nor do I remember the length of the video until he pointed it out. Anyway, the first question, which hashtag one question, it's the first question on top of that. Hey, Happy, doing alright? I'm doing alright. Hope you're feeling better, and long live all your hard drives. Yeah, they're doing better now at the very least. My question this week is a bit of a lore one that has to do with the Nier raid and the healer role quest. I remember that in the healer role quest there was a stone blight that basically turned people's skin to stone, petrifying them in Tamra. Do you think this could be the way to tie the white Chlorinian syndrome from Nier into the lore of Final Fantasy XIV? So I'm just going to say I would accept this, because my biggest problem with the Nier raid's first iteration is it's so self-contained and uninteresting from a perspective of someone who wants it to enhance the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, from a Nier perspective, it's great fan service, it's fun, it's got great music, it's got all the makings of something that you should be able to enjoy, theoretically. But I always like these 24-mans, I like every piece of content when it can, to make sense and be canonical in the lore. We know this is, and I want to see how that actually enriches our experience here, as opposed to just being blind fan service. I've criticized blind fan service since Omega. I mean, I've even criticized it before then, but Omega is the most glaring example of that. I don't want Nier to fall into the same category. So if they can do this, tie these two things together, sure, I welcome it. It's possible. I couldn't say they couldn't do it, so yeah, sure, why not? Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Haps. Hello. The amount for leveling everything to 80 has actually motivated me to start getting everything to 80, 6 out of 17 so far, but a couple of job stories have not been able to keep my interest, so I end up skipping the cutscenes and speeding through the dialogue. What are a couple of your favorite storylines from the job quest? This is actually hard to answer, because sometimes I like the 10 level stretch, and sometimes I don't like the next one. The warrior one, 1 to 50 is really good, 50 to 60 is okay, and 60 to 70 is debatable. I think it's kind of funny, but it's much more aloof than the other ones. Dark Knight's pretty solid the whole way through. Machinist, I'm not super interested in. Gunbreaker, I'm a fan of. Dancer is also very interesting and has a very satisfying ending at level 80. Dragoon's great, 1 to 50. It didn't really hold my interest after that. It was okay. It wasn't the worst of them. Monk starts pretty good and slowly declines every expansion quest-wise, if you ask me. And then there's a bunch that I kind of just don't remember. Those ones stand out to me off the top of my head. Unfortunately, I don't really remember some of the... I remember a lot of the 1 to 50s, but from 50 to 80 is shaky, whether or not I actually remember them. Like, Scholar 1 to 50 is really good, and Scholar has some shining moments from 50 to 70, but I don't remember the 80 quests very well. So, yeah, I actually should probably revisit some of those, because I'm sure I skipped around them, missed certain things, especially the Gunbreaker one, and I'd actually like to get a little refresher on those myself, especially Gunbreaker, because it's going to be tying into the new relic weapons, the quest there. So I'd at least advise you pay attention to that one, because it's going to directly correlate to some events that are coming in patch 5.25. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. I've been playing since 2014 and watching videos for years, but this is my first question ever. Welcome, and let's hope it's a decent question. Nah, it'll be fine. We're probably getting a new healer in 6.0. Completely agree. Do you think it's finally time for Time Mage or Chemist? So here's the thing. I don't think there's an idea I can shut down for healer. Time Mage is actually my preferred idea for a new healer. And, you know, often I get comments on the Mondays with Mr. Happy, you know, like, I have this job idea, what do you think? And I like to kind of say that I don't value my own opinion about someone else's thoughts, or I like to discuss things that are immediately relevant in the game and not things that are, I guess, very personal or personalized. I don't know. I've described it in a previous episode. But Time Mage, if there's a job other than Puppet Master that I've kind of formulated in my brain an expectation for as a healer, it is actually Time Mage. And I think as they moved some of the more time-based elements away from Astrologian, they've opened up the possibility to do it more and more. I'm not going to go into my ideas, because I'm not going to, you know, shut down what other people bring me on Mondays and then spit my own ideas. But that's definitely the one that I lean towards most. As for Chemist, Ninja Mudra system for Chemist, I think, is the one universal thing I've heard everyone agree on. The only thing is they probably wouldn't call it Chemist, because with Chemist and Alchemist, it probably get a little bit, they'd at least claim it'd probably get a little confusing. I expect something like Salve Maker, or, you know, something else, something not as, doesn't roll off the tongue as well, but there's other names you could go for. I saw someone say I said Death Nail. You know, I say Nell and Nail very close to one another. So I'm actually a fan of Achievement Hunter a lot. If you frequent my content, you know that I quote them quite frequently. And there's one very great example where they says call and cool, and they sound the same. Nell is one of those words. I say nail like Nell. So yeah, it's almost definitely because I thought it was nail as a kid and learned it was Nell later. Now I just say it interchangeably. But you got me on that one. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey there, hi there, ho there. What'd you call me? How are we doing today? I was tired earlier. I'm doing all right now. Just curious, what kind of announcement should we expect from FanFest this year? What do you think will be announced content-wise? There's been patterns in the past for past FanFest that might help us guess what's announced. It's always expansion stuff. FanFest only exists to announce expansion-related information. The first one, which has been North America every time, and that's still the case, and, you know, gives us the initial teaser trailer. It gives us the overall, you know, structure of the contents, maybe a deeper look into some of the additional features that we'll be getting. We learned that, for example, PS3 support was going to be annihilated during the Stormblood North American FanFest. We learned that about Blue Mage in the Shadowbringers one. So, yeah, generally we maybe get a little bit more information about some things, but the North American one is always very, you know, high level information. It's not very deep. We don't learn about what the new jobs are very often. We don't learn about, you know, what the raid theme is, and there's always things that are missing. So we always look forward to the Japanese and the European ones from home when it comes to some additional information on top of that. So that's what you should expect. Expect the first one to be general overview with a little bit of detail. The second one to dive deeper into specific details, maybe a job, maybe a new feature. And then for the third one to wrap everything they started off with on the first one up, but still leave a few questions for the media tour to come in however many months after it is. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Happy. First time asker, long time watcher. First video watch was T9 Guide. I don't even remember if that was any good. That was like a 27-minute video, wasn't it? So I have a bonus of one of the strange helmets from the New Year's event. Thank you. For my question, do you think that bots are a really bad problem on the market board? Some friends at my free company always complain about the market deflation, but on other servers I played before, I've not even heard about them. Thank you for your guides. It really helps, especially from turn 3 and 4, and keep up with the good work. You always have to keep in mind that when people talk about there being certain problems in Final Fantasy XIV, they're not... How should I say this? It's not that they don't exist, but their scale is relatively anecdotal. Another example, you know, in a different topic, would be people saying that everyone down item levels for Crystal Tower in the 24-man. That's not particularly true. There's definitely some people that do it, and if anyone does it, it increases the odds of getting a Crystal Tower raid, you know, at all. Like, if one person out of the next 24 people who queue do it, then that will do it. But it's not like 12 out of the 24 people are doing it. It's just how easy it is to make yourself get that as a 24-man and for it to affect the other people queuing into the roulette. So for this problem, it's very similar. They are certainly there. If I go right now, I can probably find them. But they're not affecting the amount of purchases that I go through the market board very often. I'd say the one they affect most is probably shards and crystals. Stuff that I often do see, if I see bots at all in Final Fantasy XIV. They're always doing one of two things. They're either doing the main scenario to quickly collect the gil from the main scenario, and then that's what they sell off, or they're farming shards and crystals and stuff like that. So I'd say if your friends are specifically looking at that sort of super easy access market, then they'll see it a lot more. But for other things, they're there, but they're certainly not as widespread as people might lead you to believe. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, apps, it seems like the longing for 5.2 finally comes to an end. And it does. And yet, isn't it kind of aggravating? You can still waste experience points rewards from the challenge log, basically hitting that nice challenge log bonus with a max level job, obtaining gil but no EXP, or should side quests give additional rewards at max level, like more like tomes? No, we don't need more tomestones from anything else. I agree that experience points from challenge logs are generally wasted. The thing is, you can totally plan around it. So it's if it ever happens, it's almost certainly the player's fault. And fault is not really the right word, because sometimes you're just playing like, oh, I'm gonna cap my tomes today, and you're 4 dungeons deep, and on the 5th dungeon you get a challenge log completion, and you could swap off the job that you're level 80 on and be like, oh, I'm about to finish my challenge log, let me go do this. But you're not going to, because it's just not what you logged in to do in the first place. So I think it would be pretty cool if you could choose to hold the completion of a challenge log. Similar to, I guess, the Wondrous Tales. You know how when you get a sticker, you still have to choose to apply it, and then it applies to a random spot? It'd be nice if you could get, like, the challenge log complete, but you have to select it in order to actually collect the rewards from it. That way you could choose if you want to get the experience points and use it on something else. That does create other issues, though. Then people farm challenge logs on max level jobs and use them on low level jobs, but that's such a minuscule thing. I don't think that really affects much about the game itself. That's just like a person's choice to do that. You know, they can either level the job and get the challenge log as they go, but if they're afraid of it going to waste and they want to do other things, then they have another option. I think that would probably be the best solution, is to make challenge logs complete like that. You know, make it so you have to actually choose to finish and get the rewards. Well, I got my answer from the beginning of the video. It's a lot of questions, just not a lot of random comments. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, it's my first time here, so obligatory. How you doing? You doing all right? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? And a prayer for your Eden weapon tomorrow. Tomorrow? 5 days? What? Wait. Oh, no, wait. I could have sworn when I recorded this last week, we had already maxed out my character? Had we? I don't know. When tomorrow? Oh! So I get it. This is because it's for next Monday, and then Tuesday the patch comes out. Probably won't be E8 on the first day. I mean, I'm aiming for 2 or 3 days, but, you know, maybe, if we're lucky. Thanks for wishing me luck. Side note, if you remember a long time ago, you're still doing Healer Happy Let's Play. I'm the person that sent you the title edit for your Crystal Tower episode. You're complaining about queues. You mentioned seeing it episodes after. Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Thanks. My question is pretty short. How do your teams usually prepare for new tiers? Do you just buy everything you need from the market board, get it crafted, or craft it yourself? My team is overall pretty poor guild-wise, unfortunate. And we still have 2 crafters, including me and our friends group. It's a pretty taxing ordeal getting everything together day one. I think that entirely depends on what you're trying to do day one. I don't world prog anymore, or at least I don't aim for, you know, a major world placement. It's just kind of a side thing. Like, if we finish in top 10, we finish top 10, whatever. But that being said, we still, most of the groups I raid with still go through some pretty serious prep. We like to make sure we have, you know, capped of the tomestones, both in this case Goetia and Phantasmagoria, because we'll be able to convert Goetia into Phantasmagoria, and that's a ton of crafted item materials that we'll be able to feed into crafters that we've hired and prepared and will pay to craft us items as soon as the patch becomes available. They'll go get the scripts, they'll go get the books, or whatever they need to do. We'll give them gil, we'll give them material, we'll give them as many items as we can to reduce their cost, and then they'll make us the items, and like in between, like maybe during like a break to eat food, or in between lockouts, they'll quickly trade it to us, and then we can meld it ourselves. They can meld it for us ahead of time if we provide them the materia. But this is not something the majority of groups do. Majority of groups get as close to 470 as they can. And this includes players. Maybe buy some 480 stuff, at least a weapon off the market board. And then it's a matter of, do you want to do Ruby weapon first and maybe get a 485 weapon and then start working on Savage? Or do you want to dive into Savage head first? Make sure you have food, pots, gear. Everything's repaired every time you go in. If you can't repair yourself, like I won't be able to on my alt this time around. And, other than that, but most casual people just will approach it, at their own leisure. They're not so worried about what day one looks like, So it depends on just what kind of atmosphere, what kind of group you're in. And without that, I can't really say what you should be doing, only what those of us who plan on spending the 16 to 18 hours day one and, 12 to 16 hours on subsequent days are going to be doing. All right, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Greetings from Gilgamesh. That's my server. Well, not this raid tier, it's not, but it is still my server. That's where my main is. Hey, Mr. Happy, how you doing? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. My question is rather lore-based and also something I'd want your opinion on. With our ever-growing cast of those who have the ability to use the Echo, it's becoming apparent that our Scions are becoming accustomed to various classes. My question is this: for the remaining classes that haven't been used by our Scions, who do you think we should take on the Machinist class lore-wise? It's worth mentioning that not all of the Scions have the Echo. This is a common misconception where people think like Y'shtola and Thancred can use the Echo. They can't. They have a higher ether sensitivity, and in the case of those two in particular, they have some ether poisoning that's led to certain, problems with their functionality or the way they have to actually go about functioning. But Kryl, Arenvald, Isael, those are people with the Echo, and some of them come and go, and some of them stay gone, unfortunately. Looking at you, Isael. So, we can't really relate the two things, because the Echo isn't what makes the Scions able to pick up another class. They also don't pick up classes, they pick up skills, and they kind of just like meld them to their own character. That's why Y'shtola is not a black mage, she's a sorceress, because she uses all 6 of the elements, but she uses them in an astral capacity. And then she's able to build them up and use some familiar spells, but also some brand new ones that normal black mages and even white mages don't have access to. You've Orion J, who is very clearly an Asher and is labeled as such, but he's able to cast things like Death. Because that's just, those are magic skills he's picked up over time. So, you have to keep in mind that it's kind of a loose interpretation. That's why Y'shtola's had the Astrologian barrier, for all this time, even though she's gone from being a conjurer to a sorceress and, everything in between. So as for a machinist, the only person that's worthy of that is Cid for me. And I mean, I guess maybe, depends on who you consider our ally. Nero Tolskeva would also not be too surprising to see him pick up the machinist. Yeah, pick up being a machinist. But Cid or Nero, I think it's got to be somebody with a high propensity for the technological arts, and I don't see that amongst our average Scion. Before I even take this question, it just kind of hit me. Hilda also, kind of a more direct, person to look at. Anyway, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Cutting it close, and I know with all the hype to Eden, could the 4th fight be Shiva mixed with Hraesvelgr? So I've brought this up in so many Mondays with Mr. Happy that, unfortunately, I'd have to presume you haven't been watching all the way through the previous weeks. So the answer, that's literally been the #1 thing I've suggested for the past probably month and a half to 2 months. However, now that we know the name is Refulgence, I know people are looking at Esterung, and also looking at some of the other language names, and some of them have adjacent meanings to freezing. Some of them not so specific as freezing ice, but things like, refractive light off of a crystal, or crystallization or solidification. I listen, I won't say no, because I think it's still possible, especially with some of the parallels that can be drawn with the name. But I'm less hopeful now that we've seen the name and that we know how the term Esterung has been used by Urian J in particular, that it leaves this in question mark. So it's a 50-50 for me at this point. Next one, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi Haps, how you doing? I'm doing alright. I'm doing alright. Third time asking, I promise this time my question will be a lot shorter. Listen, I don't remember how long the first 2 were, but I'm here and I'm answering them. Okay, so for some reason you said third time asker, and I thought there were 3 questions. I don't know why. One, do you think Thornton will be the next ultimate, or could it be Nidhogg? So Thornton, here's the thing. I am a firm, and no one will change my mind on this except for Square Enix themselves. I don't think Thornton's a good ultimate. I specifically mean Thornton and his knights. It seems like everyone's idea of Thornton as an ultimate is him and his knights are just better again. And that's so lame and so uncreative. And people are like, oh, you can just make his knights do more things. And that's like, the knights aren't very interesting. They're not interesting in Final Fantasy VII. They're not interesting here. And making them interesting is a stretch beyond imagination. It's not that you couldn't make some super crazy shit where all of the knights do a mechanic simultaneously, but there's so many copies amongst the knights. There's like 3 dragoons. There's 3 of, well, actually, yeah, there's 3 dragoons, the lance wielders. They do both the spinning and the dive bomb attacks. You have 2 sword wielders. You have 1 axe wielder. I think you have 1 mage, and then I think, I'm trying to remember, there was like 4 or 5 different variants of knight, so they overlap the skills they have available to them quite quickly. So unless Thornton is mixed with Nidhogg himself, like they're both in the same fight, or even mixed with the Warring Triad, because Thornton's original goal was to absorb the Warring Triad when he went to Azazla and to obtain this godlike power that he would rule over the world with an iron fist. So I think if he's like part of those, sure. Nidhogg, same deal. Nidhogg kind of on his own still needs a story to be told. I feel like Thornton is a part of that story. But the big final question is Shinryu, because Thornton, Nidhogg, and Shinryu all have one thing in common, and that is Nidhogg's eyes. It's essentially the journey of Nidhogg's eyes through everything, including our encounter with the Griffin, where Shinryu is initially summoned, and that even loops Omega in for a little bit. So there's the question mark with them adding Dancer and Gunbreaker Shinryu weapons this patch, if that's going to be the next ultimate, which will be in 5.5x. So I'm hopeful, but it's one of them. It's like either Warring Triad or like Nidhogg, Thornton, and Shinryu. It's those like 6 bosses are what's in the pool and we're most likely to see. What they decide to do, entirely going to be a surprise, in my opinion, at this point. And is there a chance you could bring bestiaries back? So bestiary is always something I'm kind of teetering on bringing back, because there's only so many different things you can analyze that are different across the different Final Fantasy games. I've tried a few bestiaries where I just talk about a character who's part of a single Final Fantasy game, and, you know, maybe makes an appearance in Dissidia or whatever. And it just, something didn't ring the same. It's a series I always consider on the shelf, where it's up there, it's collecting dust, but I could take it down at any point. And yeah, I mean, that's just where it is. So it's never canceled, but I can never say when the next one will be. That's the best way to put it. Oh boy, I see a lot of text. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, hope you are well. I'm doing swell. I hope you're doing the same. We'll find out how you're doing after these 2 huge oh my god, 3 paragraphs. Oh boy. And then on top of that, there's an edit at the bottom. Okay, let's see here. So I have a question for you in regards to rating, specifically how to deal with failure. Okay, that's actually a good topic. So I'm assuming most of this is kind of like backstory to the question. My static has been progging T since it came out. We have reached the burn after wormholes as all our current wall, but unfortunately we have currently stopped progging due to 5.2 and Savage coming out. Perfectly normal. Our situation at the start of the patch unfortunately cost us roughly a month of prog, found a new healer. But with 2 solid months of prog, we got through all of BJ and CC and all of Alex Prime. We started pulling extra hours to try and push for a clear, but we kept having mistakes pop up more and more as we pulled. 3 hours a night, 3 nights a week. Dude, that is an incredibly tough schedule to beat Ultimate with. So you've actually made really good progress for 9 hours a week. And I think you should be happy about that. Now I'm confronted with the intense feeling of disappointment because, hand on my heart, as a raid leader, I fully believed that we could kill the content. And you probably still can. I still do, and as you just said, but I feel the rest of the group is just kind of beaten. A few members perceive the 3 months as a waste of time since we didn't clear it, and a few others might not want to go back after Savage is done. I'm not sure what to do. This was our first Ultimate Prog as a group, and I'm fighting that feeling in the back of my head to cut the weakest links and just re-prog with more consistent players because everyone in the group is a good friend. What would you suggest to keep people's morale up? Beat the shit out of 5.2's raid. Dude, people are always on a low when you don't beat something in the time you expect to beat it, and then people are on a high when you beat the next coolest thing. Get them on that morale high, get them through 5.2, and then go back. Because here's the number one thing to remember. If you're doing Ultimate at only 9 hours a night, let's put it this way. If you were on an Enrage pull, you have used 1/12 of your raid night on a single pull. Think about that. 1/12 of your entire raid night. That's not including anyone needing to get up and use the restroom, someone go up, get a drink, their kids crying, their cats throwing up. That is excluding anything. That is 1/36 of your entire week of raiding if you do a single pull to Enrage. And honestly, it's even more than that because I'm assuming it's 15 minutes. The fact that you made that progress with that amount of time, when you really need to buckle down generally to get through some of the tougher phases there, to clean things out, to get enough clean pulls to understand it, to experience it, I'd say nobody should be at a morale low. Because I think you've done fine, to be honest. I know people have been in the same boat as you, and they eventually get around to it. Think about how there will be no ultimate until after 5.5. So probably 5.51 realistically. I'm going to quickly go to my calendar. I can almost predict when we will have the next ultimate. Here, let's see. I'll go into my calendar. This is just to give you perspective on how much time you guys still have to beat it and why there's really no point in giving up. So I predicted that June 9th would be 5.3. September 29th would be 5.4. So let's see. 4, 8, 13. So let's say January 19th, 2021 is my prediction for patch 5.5. Now, of course, those can be like a week or two off. It just depends on, how the rest of the schedule ends up looking. So let's assume that February 2nd is the next ultimate. It's February 16th right now when I'm answering this. The 17th when you see it. Why does it matter if it's not beat before 5.2? People go back and beat Ukab and Uwu way after their prime all the time. Just get through 5.2 and then go back and beat it. That's my answer. They get their morale back up by beating that, and then you should be fine. Oh boy. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays, aka Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions, I answer them. Hi. How you doing? I'm doing alright. Bonus to regular soldier. What kind of useless crap is that? Thank you. Why do White Mage get so many better AoE tools for AoEing than Scholar? They've got damage and damage mitigation in one button, while Scholar has to heal between attacks, and it's on the global cooldown, so you might have to pop emergency heals if bursts happen. It also somewhat applies for Astro, and at least have light speed. So I'd like to point a couple things out. One, I'm assuming you're referring to AoE healing? I'm assuming? That's what because you just say AoEing, which is not very particular. I can tell you White Mage is meant to be a throughput machine, because they do not have any other utility other than a single target shield and I guess the bonus healing from Asylum. They don't offer any raid damage. They are literally meant to be the most pure healer feeling healer of the batch. And they capture that feeling in this way, in this means that you've suggested. But you also said they have damage and damage mitigation in the form of a stun, which applies wholly, which tells me you mean offense. As regards to offense, it's very similar. They don't offer any raid DPS, so their personal DPS is generally higher or more effective in some ways to make up for that. But also, I'd like to point out something like have to pop emergency heals if bursts happen. It's generally not how Final Fantasy XIV works. Final Fantasy XIV is a very scripted game where you should know exactly the point in any fight or any encounter where, assuming everything is done correctly, that you need certain tools. Sometimes when you're not really maining that role, you kind of overestimate it and maybe let people die because you're like, oh, whatever, they'll live and I'll medic 2 after or something like that. And then somebody just takes a little too much and you miss it. But that being said, that's just why White Mage is the throughput machine. I always do mix up throughput and throughput. It's like Death Nail and Death Knell all over again. Yeah, no, I don't think it needs to be addressed at all. I think it's entirely intended and it probably won't change. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Mr. Happy. Hello. I have an old school raid question for you. Oh boy. Someone who started playing the game during the middle of Heavensward and never experienced the Coil of Bahamut when it was on content. So I was wondering if you could shed some light on why the world first for Turn 5 took so much longer than all the subsequent raid tiers. I know the game was brand new, but it doesn't really make sense. There is a hell of a story behind that. So, when A Realm Reborn first released, topic number 1, there was a 300 latency, a 300 ms latency built into the game on top of your normal latency. So basically, let's say you were playing with 180 ping. If you were doing that in 2.0, you innately had a 480 ms ping. Yikes. Half a second screws with a lot of people. So if you weren't sub 100 ping, you suffered big time. So that's number 1. Now that leads into problem number 2, twisters. Twintania had a mechanic called twisters, which tracked you up to a point and then would drop in a previous location you were standing. So about like 75% into the cast bar of Twisters, it would see where the character was standing and then drop a bomb there after it finished casting. And if you were still standing on it, then you died. Because of that built-in 300 ms latency and the strictness of Twister's spawn timing, it was actually sometimes impossible. You could run a straight line and get hit by your own Twister just because of the time it dropped down, and that would just kill people constantly. And on top of that, the fight was shut down for, I think, almost 3 weeks because people were finding glitches or bugs. They would like they would render the fight basically unplayable, or they would like lock the boss from using attacks and then kill it. And so they just constantly kept punishing these people, reverting their kills, and then taking the servers down to fix it. And then on top of all that, I mean, it was also very, I don't want to say it was gear locked, because I just think we were much worse at the game back then, but people felt like it was gear locked. People wanted weeks and weeks of loot on top of that. So between being shut off for 3 weeks, which immediately makes it longer than any raid tier that we've almost ever had at that point, because most of them are between, 14 and 21 days, the longer ones that is. And everything else. Yeah, it was a disaster. It was bad. And then one team killed it right before they were about to nerf it, and then they nerfed it, and all the people who had been working on it beat it like the next day. And it was not much to talk about after that. All right, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, how you doing? Thanks for answering my question about the hunt problems on PS4 a while back. I think I remember that question, so no problem. So my static and I finally cleared E4 Savage about 3 weeks before the next year, and we went into T just to say we saw it. Needless to say, we died instantly. While I don't believe my group is interested in ultimates, I found myself curious when I looked up a video guide on YouTube similar to what you and the other creators posted in the past. Found almost nothing that isn't over an hour long. I also looked into a guide that has the same experience. Are these fights really so intense that no one can create a succinct guide for them? Your most succinct guides for Ultimate, and I think the most valuable format for Ultimate guides is text guides. You just don't need to hear someone speak to do these things. Like, sometimes it's nice to have someone explain something to you. Some people find it almost as like a form of entertainment to have somebody explain it. I know I used to watch all the old tank spot videos for World of Warcraft, even when I wasn't playing, just because I found it fascinating. But when it comes to Ultimate, honestly, if you want something succinct, text. Text will, any detail you need to know in particular, Control F, look at it, and you don't need to read everything else. If you want to read everything else, you've got something to read. But the short answer is no. It really is that intense that most people feel the need to go into excruciating detail. I didn't do an Epic of Alexander one because I got a lot of harassment after I left my raid group that had already half fallen apart. And I just didn't feel like dealing with that, and by not posting any more Epic of Alexander content, I kind of hoped to achieve that. It never goes away for good, but at the very least, I didn't have to keep hearing about that for the time being. But even after I cleared it, if I had made a video, probably would have been like hour and a half, 2 hours. It just is that kind of content where people want to discuss how they learned it, what went into thinking about how they approach it, why you need to approach it in a certain way, and alternate ways you could approach it if you're not a fan of what you're seeing or hearing right there. So for Ultimate in particular, no, I probably wouldn't make anything less than 45 minutes. I would highly advise looking for a text guide for it. I think that's the best format for Ultimate guides. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Yo, Haps, how you doing? I got a burp. I'm not going to, though. Apologies if this has been asked before, which I'm sure it has. Most of these questions have, but that's fine. But you have referenced several times that any collaboration 14 is not part of the canon. What about Nier? The Evil East series and Crystal Tower have both been included as core parts of the lore. So there's a difference between something being a collaboration and something being a reference, I suppose. So specifically events that are advertised as Monster Hunter X Final Fantasy 14 or Final Fantasy 14 X Final Fantasy, those are considered collaborations. Those are basically limited time events, or in the case of Monster Hunter, maybe not so limited time, where the developers have specifically stated or created some sort of branched content that's away from the rest of the game for everyone to enjoy. The Crystal Tower is an immense reference in Final Fantasy. It's in this case, you could compare the Crystal Tower to like how Ifrit is in every Final Fantasy game. This is just like taking the Crystal Tower, which is a staple in the Final Fantasy series, going back to Final Fantasy 3, or I should say it's not a staple, it's a landmark of the Final Fantasy series that dates back to Final Fantasy 3, and what's it called? Putting it in the world and making it a part of the world. This isn't Final Fantasy 3's Crystal Tower. This is Final Fantasy 14's Crystal Tower, which is why I make the Ifrit analogy. Evil East series is the same. This is not the Evil East from Final Fantasy 12 and Tactics. However, the guy who created the world, Matsuno-san, and created all that story, wrote this so it's as loyal to the original source material as possible. But this isn't Ivalice in Final Fantasy XIV from those games. This is Final Fantasy XIV's version of Ivalice. Nier sits in that same category. Nier is not a collaboration. Nier, well, I mean, it's not a collaboration in the same sense. Yes, they're bringing in the developers and the designers and whatnot. But this is a part of Final Fantasy XIV world and lore, which is why I so densely, what are the words I'm using to answer this question? Why I so intensely criticize it, because it's done nothing to expand upon Final Fantasy XIV's lore, or at least the first's lore yet. We're going to give it till 5.3 and see if it makes any effort to do so, or it's going to be getting closer and closer to being thrown in that Omega bin, where it's just mindless fan service that does maybe a little to enhance the game, but is otherwise wildly unappealing to me. So yeah, hopefully that establishes the difference between what a collaboration event is versus something from another game, either Square Enix owned or from the Final Fantasy franchise, being incorporated into Final Fantasy XIV. Yeah, see, almost less comments, way more questions. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. How's it going? It's going all right. Thanks for asking. Question regarding the two stories in Eden. What do you think the chances are the two storylines interceding with us summoning and fighting a primal of both light and dark, or astral and umbral? I can't think of anyone from 8 who'd fit, so maybe in the form of a certain good King Mogomog. So no, to answer the last part in particular. So that doesn't really make sense. So you have to think about it from the way that that ether works in Final Fantasy XIV, well, the way that it's been explained and explored thus far. The big thing with light and dark, or in this case, as you said, astral and umbral, is what their exact properties are. So when it comes to astral properties, well, see, we used to think that astral was light aspected, and umbral elements, or umbral affinities, were all like dark aspected. We've gone over that quite a bit. What we've learned is it's the opposite. Something that's astral is something that rapidly causes the ether kind of like rapidly tries to consume everything. That's what the void is. Whereas the umbral aspected ether is what's on the first, which is everything stagnates. So something that's astrally aspected, like the darkness that we're dealing with Gaia here, would actually be largely beneficial to the empty on the first. So it's a big question mark of how the Oracle of Darkness, who theoretically should be, have massive access to this sort of astral ether, how she can use it. We don't know yet, though. And so I don't think it'll be a primal, though. I think it'll be something to do directly with Gaia's origins, where she's from, who's really pulling the strings here. And I hope that we find that out at some point, soon. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays, hashtag 2 questions. Hi, how are you today? I got a burp all of a sudden. Got like a little heartburn. I'm doing all right otherwise. So with White Mage getting more astral-based spells, I find it strange that Fluid Aura is still water and not light. Do you think Fluid Aura could possibly convert, or is it just going to stay water? Do you like the idea of Geomancer or Chemist as a healer to the next expansion? Dude, I want Geomancer to be a DPS personally, but they can do whatever they want. It makes more sense for Geomancer based on the lore we already have around it to be a healer. So I'm going to be very blunt with Fluid Aura. It's lucky it's still in the game. I have a feeling it only didn't change because it's so irrelevant that they just left it. Maybe took away the knockback and just said, well, here? I don't think there's anything lore related that they'll ever do with Fluid Aura. I think it's sooner to just be outright removed from White Mage next expansion than you'll see it evolved. The odds are just that it won't survive another expansion. I see the hashtag at the end, which is new. I appreciate it. Hi, hello, hola. I pray you are well. Thank you. Do you believe we will have a collaboration with Type 0? I would love the dramatic music, stylish clothes, and weapons feature on 14. No. So Type 0, here's the weird thing. I play a lot of Dissidia Opera Omnia. You guys know I made a sponsored video for it this last week, but I've done sponsored and non-sponsored video for it. It's up on my tablet right now because Aranea comes out in just about 2.5 hours from now. And they love Type 0 and Dissidia Opera Omnia. From what someone tells me, it's maybe a little more popular in Japan than it is in the West, but it's also old at this point. And so I don't think they're going to do a collaboration. And honestly, I don't think they're going to do a Type 1. Like, Tabata, who was in charge of Type 0, he did 15. He tried to salvage that scrap heap after everything that happened with it over the 7 years prior to him being in charge. And, you know, with that, he then wanted to do something new. And now, I mean, Tabata's, from what I remember, is releasing later this year a game about the Paralympics. It's a fully fledged RPG based on the Paralympics to celebrate the 2020 Olympics being in Tokyo, and it's going to be about the struggles of those who you know, deal with you know, physical issues and are competing in this, but deal with constant scrutiny. He's trying to create something that's very message oriented, but also still very true to him being an RPG developer. And I don't think he'll ever even try to make something similar to Type 1. And I don't think Square Enix will try to do Type 1 without Tabata. I don't know if the franchise made enough, or that title in particular made enough money to warrant them actually diving into a Type 1. So unless they eventually do Type 1, I don't think you'll ever see anything. You might see things like, we actually have hairstyles from Type 0 in Final Fantasy XIV already, but that's about it. I don't think you'll see more than that. Alright, next one. I think I'm getting close to the end of these questions here. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Oh my goodness, there's so much text. Hi, Happy. Have you been enjoying the break between patches? I have. Smiley face. This will likely be a bit long, and regarding the recent announcements of Red Mage potency buffs, in my experience with Red Mage. Okay, so before I even look at this, I don't know if I'll have an answer. I'm not a Red Mage expert. You might be, but my perception on it, after what you're going to present me a bunch of facts, and I'm going to be like, okay. Because I don't play it, so I don't have any expertise on it. So like, yeah, you're just like listing changes here. I have no expertise on this. I can provide nothing to the discussion. And oh my goodness, it's not gonna happen. I'm gonna leave this in the video, but there's no chance that I even A, follow, or B, have anything of importance to input on this, because these are questions. These are ideas being presented, and I don't see a question mark in a single place. So I don't know what you wanted out of me from this, but hi. All right, that was the last. I want to say unfortunately, because it's kind of rude, but it wasn't really a question. I'm ending on a not question, because the only other question is a speculation one that, again, I don't have any input on. It's not something that I can really provide input on. And then the rest are comments that I don't want to read again. I don't want to read them again. So that's going to be it for Mondays with Mr. Happy this week. So thank you, everyone, for asking a question what am I doing? This week, yes. And then you ask a question next week. Ask a question in the comment section of the video below for next week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you to all of our patrons. Thanks to everyone tuning in, and hopefully you're all looking forward to patch 5.2. Sorry, I got 2 texts right as it happened. One from my mother and from a friend. And so I was just like distracted because I was like, oh, my phone's lighting up. So thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. I'll see you next week for the next episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Enjoy 5.2, and until next time, take care.